So as we know, this past Sunday, there was another bombing incident in the world. 2 bombs were set off in 2 different churches on Palm Sunday, killing more than 40 people. And then the following day in this country, there was another school shooting. So my concern about these incidents is that as a society, we'll become used to it, we'll get complacent about it, and it won't eventually create a reaction in us. That's my greatest fear. So it's very normal for ordinary people to think of these recurring events, these tragic, extremely violent events, and feel despair and go into personal distress. That's really normal for personal people. But as spiritual practitioners, we're hopefully continuing to cultivate our toolbox of how to deal with this and be an example for others. So of course we need to continue with our practice and just be determined that no matter what, we attain full awakening for the benefit of others. But then after our retreat ended and I got back online, after hearing about those incidents, I read another story which was truly upsetting, but it does have, we can do something about this, and I think it will help our feeling of sometimes feeling helpless in the face of these things that take place all over the world. So I'm going to share this news article with you. The link for this article will be in the paragraph below the BBC, so you can reread it again and get some ideas about this. So also as Buddhist practitioners, we've probably taken precepts, and the first precept is to make a strong determination not to engage in harm or to not engage in killing. So we can actually do something about this one. So here's the story that really got my interest. I had no idea that it was this bad out there. There's a federal judge and a legal scholar by the name of Guido Calabresi. He was apparently a Yale Law School professor for many decades. And he liked to pose the following conundrum to his law students. He asks them to imagine a deity coming forth to offer society a wondrous invention, one that would make everyday life more pleasant in almost every way. This invention comes with a cost, however. In exchange, the deity would choose 1,000 young men and women and strike them dead. Calabresi then asks the students if they accept the deal. In 30 years of giving a lecture at Yale, the answer is almost always no, at which point he delivers the lesson. What's the difference between this and the automobile? Cars, trucks, automobiles. So the author of this story makes the following points. Modern society is impossible to imagine without the car. Yet it's also one of the biggest destroyers of life. In the United States, crashes claim 1,000 lives every 9 days. That's just in this country. Last year, 40,000 Americans died, about as many as from breast cancer and more than twice as many as from murder. So we put up with these costs because we imagine them as unavoidable human imperfection. We're willing to make some changes like wearing seatbelts and driving sober, which cause deaths to decline gradually for decades, but we assume there's no cure. We've accepted the deity's offer, modernity in exchange for 1,000 lives, again and again and again. The digital revolution, however, is changing this calculation. It's both making the problem worse and creating a potential solution. So first, the bad news, and this is the shocking part. Vehicle deaths are surging. They're up 14% in the last 2 years. This is just this country. It's the first significant rise in a half century, in 50 years, which qualifies this as a public health emergency. So in this article, there's a link to click on which will take you to this other website by the National Safety Council, and it gives us a little bit more information about this. So again, they say 40,000 people died in this country last year because of motor vehicle crashes. That marks a 6% increase over 2015 and a 14% increase over 2014. The most dramatic 2-year escalation since 1964. That's 53 years. An NSC survey, that means the National Safety Council, released this on February 15th, that provides a glimpse at the risky things drivers are doing. Although 83% of all drivers surveyed believe driving is a safety concern, a startling number of them say they're comfortable speeding. That's 64% of people. They're comfortable speeding. People who are comfortable texting, either manually or through voice controls, that's 47%. They say it's no problem. Driving while impaired by marijuana, 13% of the people, no problem. And if they've had too much alcohol, 10% of the population feels that's no problem. So the only plausible cause which this article is targeting is texting. This is the rise for the increase in deaths. Calling, watching, posting, whatever people do on their phones. This is the cause for this dramatic increase. Then the article goes on to tell very sad stories. You can read these for yourself too, about how people have died. I'll just share one right now. The same afternoon I was reading this, someone else sent me this report from a Canadian newspaper the same afternoon about some deaths that occurred March 31st in Houston, Texas this year. And here's the story. The driver of a pickup truck collided with a church minibus in rural Texas, killing 13 people. What was the 20-year-old doing? He confessed. He was texting. People tried to intercept this accident, which is even sadder. A number of people saw this person on the road. They saw him crossing the center line many, many times. They called the police. They called 911. Many people were on the way to get to this person, and they didn't get there soon enough. He collided with this van. So the author of this story seems to think that stories like this won't persuade people to give up distracted driving. He says we're overconfident about our own driving abilities. Oh, I'll just glance at my phone. There's a straightaway here. No problem. And these smartphones are just so darn enticing, he says. This is a really difficult traffic safety problem, unlike any others. And the people who are sort of getting on board now to get this awareness out are the people who have lost family members. Everyone else thinks, no problem, I can do it. I've just done a 1-month retreat. My concentration is much better. I can multitask. So, like most public health crises, this one requires a societal solution. It's you and me that can do something about this right now. Today, however, there's not a single state that has a sensible law. Most forbid holding a phone while driving, but the penalties are weak, and who really gets caught doing that? The police are just so strapped with other things. Are they really looking for that? So, apparently, the biggest thing is not the fact that you're picking up the phone and using it, because there's handheld devices now. It's the distraction that's going on, not the physical act of holding the phone. So the author makes a point like this. Think of it like this. Allowing hands-free talking and texting is akin to forbidding drivers from getting drunk on liquor, yet letting them have a few beers before getting behind the wheel. Some companies like Exxon, Mobil, and Johnson & Johnson have a better approach. They have banned employees from all smartphone use while driving. So there's a step in the right direction. So then some people who say that it's still no problem, I can do this because I've got my hands-free set in my car. There's been a lot of research now on multitasking and how it really is a human delusion, that we can't really multitask. And here's what the research shows. People can't multitask very well, and people, when they say they can, they're deluding themselves. And these are not neuroscientists talking now. And of course, a neuroscientist is going to say the brain, but we know they mean the mind. The mind is very good at deluding itself. Another professor says, we simply can't focus on more than one thing at a time. We can't. What we can do, he says, is we can shift our focus from one thing to another at astonishing speed, but we're still shifting our focus. We can't stay on two things at the same time. It's impossible. So switching from task to task, you actually think you're paying attention to everything around you at the same time, but you're actually not. So I think the bottom line for this kind of information, and to see the shocking statistics on this, is that as Buddhist practitioners, we've made a determination that we're not going to engage in harm. Whether we're ordained or not, we all get behind the wheel. We can be an example and not be enticed by the phone. And we can also take the risk of, if we're driving with someone, in our community we don't own a phone. We try and take a phone with us when we're out on our errands, but we usually never turn it on. So that's a really good thing. But if we're in a car with someone who has a phone and you see them reaching for the phone, I think it's fine. Imperative that we say, hey, please, let's pull over. Can you wait and get that call? You got voice stuff going on. The call will wait. And so in this way, we might jeopardize some friendships temporarily, but this is something we can do something about. And by making this decision, whoever we are, that I will not answer the phone in the car, we're going to be more present with everything else that's going on. And as we know from the retreat that we just finished, I don't know about you, but it's my experience that I'm easily distracted. And if that happens on a meditation cushion, sure enough, it happens behind the wheel. So I feel hopeful that we can do something about this. I think we should share this article with everyone that we know, send it to people you know, the link will be in this talk. And let's really put our minds towards being, protecting life and not having to live with the fact that if we do hit someone and kill others, that's what we live with for the rest of our life, like that 20-year-old in Texas.